such a time as this.
And welcome to For Such a Time as This round table. Please, if you are out there, give me some sort of indication that we are coming through loud and clear. Give me an indication in the chat that you can hear us. Live roundtable for such a time as this. I am your host, Pastor James Pittman. For such a time as this is, in fact, a ministry of New Hope Community Church in Palatine, Illinois. Charles Simpson, thank you. Jack, thank you. Loud and clear, thank you. Leslie Taylor. We are talking about the Christian and the election. The Christian and election. I'm going to open up. As always, we have our round table. For those of you who are new, we call them professors because the degrees we give out at New Hope is more valuable than the degrees you get at the liberal universities. So we have our professors all around. I want to open up, and just before we get into our agenda, our material, I want to just open up. We have Prof. Eric, Prof. Lisa Joy, Prof. Abby, and Prof. Chris, and I just want to open up and get your initial response to where we are. Who would like to go first? Let's start on this side of the table. Prof. Eric, how are you feeling today?
I feel great because Jesus is Lord. No matter what the situation is, no matter who says they won the election, no matter who actually did win the election, Jesus is Lord. And there was no vote about that.
Okay. Lisa Joy. Oh.
Well, I feel okay. I actually don't watch the mainstream media, so I think that's part of the reason I feel okay. But I also know that our country is built on rules and the laws that are mapped out in our Constitution. And when all is said and done, I'm pretty confident that things will be okay.
And I feel tired because I'm waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I can't get back to sleep. And I've just been going up and down and up and down. You know what? Even when there's really nothing in my mind, I still just lay there. So I get up at like 4:30. So between that and it's just, I think I'm just tired because of all the emotion of watching this whole circus, the scripture, wars and rumors of wars keep coming to my mind because there's so much information circulating, and it's so hard to know what's true and what isn't in a lot of cases, who to trust, who not to trust. So, yeah, I'm tired.
It reminds me of the hysteria when Ronald Reagan won in 1980 and the end of the world. I remember a friend of mine from school saying Ronald Reagan is the Antichrist. I said, how do you know that? Ronald Wilson Reagan, if you count the letters in his name, add up 666. I remember that 40 years ago. Then Bill Clinton won, and I remember patriots claiming that was going to be the end of the world. And then we were supposed to degrade into a socialist nightmare when Barack Obama was elected president.
We started.
this is just going to be the next phase of the. I love the analogy of boiling the frog. It's just more temperatures. You never heard that, Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
This move towards socialism has been going on for over 100 years. This isn't something that just came out of nowhere with Obama or with Clinton or now with Biden or anybody else. The big difference that I see, though, in my short time of watching these things, paying attention to it, and being a student of the Constitution and history, I've never seen this so blatant that people are willfully ignorant or don't want to even look at a fact. I remember when it used to be, if you got caught cheating in school, you got caught and you got punished. Now it depends on what your philosophy is. If you think, well, wait a minute, that's how I have to keep up with the other students, is that seen as, well, okay, I can forgive that, or I'm just going to ignore that? If it's blatant that there's something nefarious going on, yet it's one side that just doesn't want to address it, that's a huge problem. That wasn't part of the end of the world in those other presidencies. So that's the big difference that I see.
So on the agenda tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, just laying it out for you, we're going to talk about the media today is calling for Trump and his supporters to concede, for Trump and his deplorable supporters to concede. And the strange part about this is that it's even on Fox News. Watch this.
Over whoever is decided to be the president. Remember, just because CNN says, or even Fox News says that somebody's president, doesn't make them president. So I think everybody wants to know that this was done properly and legally.
What is happening? Like, Trace, we've called it.
And I think we have to look into every one of these concerns.
Yeah, and I think.
What is this crazy woman doing? Trace, we called it. It's over. The states don't need to certify. We don't need to worry about the little pesky thing called the Constitution and the Electoral College. We called it. That was Sandra Smith. And I always thought she was a level-headed lady, but it doesn't. We called it. What is going on? We called it. We. Thoughts, comments.
I just think how arrogant that, the media has run with so many different narratives. And I remember saying to, I listen to different outlets, not the mainstream. And one of the outlets that I have listened to for at least a couple years has said, keep an eye on Fox News. They are not going to be, they're going to switch. And I kept saying to one of my family members, don't believe everything you see. And when things like this happen, you go, it upsets a lot of people because they think they can trust something, and they really can't.
Well, it was. I want to look this up, but I'm pretty sure I heard that Disney bought Fox some years ago. Abby, you want to go?
I was thinking.
Hold.
I'm sorry, I did it again. I just start talking.
Yeah, you gotta wait. Go ahead.
Okay, so I thought it was Disney, but we do have to confirm that, and it was only a couple of years ago. And so we knew that was a really bad omen. And now we were all watching Fox on the night of the election. And when they quit counting, they literally stopped counting. What time was it? 9:30, 10 o'clock, something. We're on Central Time here, and we're all looking at each other going, what? And the really interesting thing was that none of these commentators noted that. Do you remember any of them saying, wait a minute, why did they quit counting? It was in Pennsylvania particularly. It was stuck at... It was all of them. It's like everybody went home. I'm tired. Let's go home. It's election night. Oh, here we go. Fox News and Fox Business are now part of the newly created Fox Corporation. I was right. The Walt Disney Company's acquisition of 21st Century Fox will become
on March 19th.
March 19th, 2019. So, yes. But you know what?
It is sad. It is sad. But now people are turning to Newsmax. Go ahead, Lisa Joy.
Yeah, but I don't think it has to do anything with the Disney thing. That is just only part of the fact because Murdoch, that owns Fox, is not a conservative. And he has rubbed shoulder. Look at Charles made a comment about it. He's always rubbed elbows with elbows. I don't think he actually, when it's all about just the ratings, they don't care about the truth. They don't care about being fair and balanced, except that everyone's clicking and everyone's watching. It's the ratings, and that's what keeps them going.
But some of the people that was on Fox were conservative, and you heard things radically different from Fox. Because I used to watch MSNBC before I even knew Fox existed. Matthew, Hardball. What's his name again? Chris Matthews. Yeah. I didn't even know Fox existed. And so when I turned Fox, I was like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. So, I mean, they were a little different at one point.
And I was just going to say, I don't think it's about the ratings because in doing this, Fox just lost, I heard, a lot. I heard a third, but I cannot verify that. People just said, I am done with Fox. And they're going to Newsmax, and they're going to what? OAN? OAN. Yeah. After what they did election night, and then also calling Arizona when there were still 1 million votes out. And that guy, I can't think of his name, he was adamant that Arizona belonged to Biden. And it was so blatant. Just the bias was just so blatant.
Get to some of the comments here on the live chat. Charles, be more specific of what you're trying to communicate. Who is it? Was that Charles? Yeah, Charles Simpson. Civil war. Okay, Charles. I hear you. More like culture wars and more specifically acceptance of immoral versus holding on to the last sliver of morality. Yeah, that's gone. J316 Ministries, turn up the heat a little at a time. Yes. Meg O. Fiat. I'm sorry, I'm bad with that. Jesus is Lord. So Meg, we'll call you Meg. Mego. Jesus is Lord, and that's not up for a vote. Amen. You are so right. And Jack King Media, but we have given them that throne in some ways. Time to point out they have no clothes on. I agree with you. Epoch Times. Meg O, tell me what that is. I'm not familiar with that.
Epic Times.
I don't know what that is. Is that a news It's a newspaper.
That is the only newspaper I get.
That is the only newspaper you get. Okay. Yes, and I do believe Tucker will be out of Fox soon if they keep going the way they are. Tucker needs to go to Newsmax and ask for a 10th ownership of the station because he will bring lots. So not only that, you have some newscasters being more specific and aggressive, telling Trump and the Trump campaign, don't worry about the pesky thing called the Constitution, the Electoral College. Don't you dare worry about the Electoral College. You dopey man. Look at Chris Cuomo. That man, watch this.
Acknowledgement of his victory. A pledge from then President Obama for help with a smooth transition to his presidency. Listen.
My number one priority in the coming 2 months is to try to facilitate a transition that ensures our president-elect is successful. We now are going to want to do everything we can to help you succeed, because if you succeed, then the country succeeds.
That from a president, and now we're hearing from Trump, who's no president. He's a dissident at best and a revenant in the main, a revenant, a dead man haunting the halls of a country in crisis. So we get what's going on. The question is, what do we do about it? First thing is, you got to keep that energy up, too. You've got to be outraged by this. Because if this dead man walking and his zombie pals in Congress are looking to make this transition into a complete horror show, the only thing that's going to stop them is the outrage of what they know just bit them in the behinds at the polls. You coming out and being active like they did not expect. So let's talk about why this is happening and what can be done. David Axel.
That is wow. People, it gets worse. It gets worse than that. You have Democrats and their allies calling for quote unquote reconciliation commissions. Do you know what a reconciliation commission is? So we actually have it up on, for such a time as this, Facebook page. You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
Isn't that newspeak for revenge?
It's a commission to put inmates in the gulags, is pretty much what it is. You're right, it's revenge. Yeah. So this article is actually up on our Facebook page. Look at the article, you can see it. It was put on November 9th. Look at it on our Facebook page. Let me read it. Says this: journalist Drew Holden shared a lengthy and alarming list of media outlets, fellow journalists, and members of the Democratic Party who are threatening retribution against Republicans supporting President Donald Trump and his allegations of voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election, and more. Goes on to say, we are not some post-genocide society, he added. The suggestions that we need a Rwandan-style Truth and Reconciliation Commission is preposterous. And free societies don't develop political hit lists. This campaign, fascism from the left needs to stop. Now would be a good time. Well, I hate to tell you, Drew, it's only just beginning. And he actually lists some of the things said. He says this: those on the list included former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich. This is what he says, who wrote, quote, when this nightmare is over, we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It would erase Trump's lies, comfort those who have been harmed by his hatefulness, and name every official, politician, executive, and media mongol whose greed and cowardice enabled this catastrophe. Close quote. MSNBC's Chris Hayes says this: the most humane and reasonable way to deal with all these people, if we survive this, is some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Philadelphia Inquirer published a similar piece entitled, What Brings U.S. Together in 21? A Truth Commission or something else? Hint, hint, wink. A wink. And Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the de facto leader of the Democrats in the House from New York, was at least one Democratic politician calling for a list as well. She wrote, watch this, quote, is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future, close quote. She's saying let's make a list so they can't run and hide. And this list is for the future. And then further, the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin, say Republicans supporting President Donald Trump's allegations of voter fraud in 2020 presidential election should be ejected from polite society. On Friday, Rubin, a quote-unquote conservative opinion columnist for the Post, tweeted this: any aura for Republican, any aura now promoting rejection of an election or calling to not to follow the will of the voters or making baseless allegations of fraud should never serve in office or join a corporate board, find a faculty position, or be accepted into, quote, polite society. We have a list, close a quote.
It's unreal to be sitting here as an American hearing this. Mm-hmm. This is our mainstream media. This is who at least half the country is listening to. And that last one, especially Jennifer Rubin, and she's supposedly the Washington Post conservative columnist, right? What we should be doing is shunning these people, making lists, making sure basically they don't work again. It is positively stunning, and it is even more stunning because this is coming from people who have tried for the last 4 years to unseat an honestly elected president that they didn't like. It's amazing.
They didn't like when he became president. They all wanted to be him before he became president. They all hung out with him and gave him awards. They wrote songs. There was praise. Everybody wanted to be a billionaire, and they all looked at this man. And then when he ran for president, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he became racist, evil, and all these orange man bad. And the purpose of all of this is to divide the country. Right? A divided country cannot stand. There's two camps that just are, the chasm is growing between the two. The only thing that bridges the chasm, and it's the same bridge that spans the chasm between God and us as sinners, and that is our submission to the will of Jesus Christ. That is the only thing that will save this country if it is God's will for it to be saved. Right. As Christians in this election, I'm appalled of how blatant. I should never be surprised at these things, but I guess I do get caught every once in a while of how blatant it is. That on the Democratic side, they don't care the means. The ends justify the means. And if that means I've got to steal, do we cheat him and how? But I'm also appalled at the Republicans and other independent parties and thinkers. Nobody does anything about it. Right? There's Donald Trump called for investigations into who really put together the investigation into him and the Russian collusion. Nothing has come from it. Right? It's been almost a year now that they've been looking at that. Nothing. So in my opinion, they're hand in hand. All they're fighting for is who gets to be in control. That's the problem. They don't get to be in control. They serve the American people. The Constitution protects our rights, but instead they're fighting for who are going to be the pigs on the animal farm. We're all equal. Some are more equal than others. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's what they're fighting for. A friend of mine used to say this, and I thought it was a very good description of the two political parties. They're just street gangs fighting for control. They don't care about the people in the neighborhood, i.e. the Americans. They really don't. They just I want to be in control. I don't want you to be in control.
But, and that's right. We've seen politics and the politicians in politics go after each other very viciously. Here's the difference. They're not just going after each other. They're going after their voters now. Mm-hmm. They're openly calling for lists of voters of political adversaries, lists to kick you out of society and to punish you. Someone asked a question on the the chat here, what's a truth commission? You do know when liberals use terms, it means the opposite of what they say, right? So a truth commission is a commission that's going to be anything but about truth, right? It's going to be a commission to examine you to see whether or not you're still against the Führer. I mean, if you're still against Biden. And if you're going to go against Biden, then there's going to be a price to pay.
Oh, and I was just wanted to make the point too, because this Jennifer Rubin commentator was talking about making baseless allegations, and actually this is the headline in the mainstream media, that all these allegations are baseless. There's absolutely zero evidence. Right. Let me ask a question. If we're working with honest people, how on earth do they know that these are baseless?
Nobody's asking that question.
No, but they're saying it. But how would they know until it's investigated?
Exactly.
Nobody knows.
But just look at the article. There was an article in the New York Times, and they talked. The headline said something about the allegations, but if you look at the wording in it, it was a play on words. It was like only some and if you look through all the different things, there were discrepancies. There were misvoted, but yet there's no. These are baseless. It was a joke, and I'm like, we're reading this, and they think we're just. But people are buying it. They're buying it.
I know what you mean.
I think the one article indicated that they had called all kinds of election officials, and I'm like, I'd like to know the party affiliation of those election officials that they talked to, who told them there was no election fraud.
Well, I would like to know and have confirmed that they actually called some election officials. I'm not convinced they called anybody.
Well, if you're asking the devil to be truthful, you're wasting your time.
That's always the reference, right? Well, we have good sources. We've got people inside the White House. I'm just old enough to remember the interview with Richard Nixon. And they caught him off guard with, so tell us about the tapes and the missing tapes. And he flipped out. There's a movie made about it. That's when journalists had the guts to ask the right questions, to ask probing questions. Is there fraud? Well, how do you know there's not? Well, there's someone who has actually sworn an affidavit stating they saw it. Several.
Hundreds.
Wouldn't you think that that's enough to at least to beg the questions?
If you're an honest person.
If you're an honest person. But again, as Christians, the truth matters. Because the truth of Jesus Christ is what we hang our hats on. The truth absolutely matters. But apparently, America has moved in a direction where the truth is relative. I guess it depends on which party you're in or how much power you might have. And that, again, I sleep at night because I know where my eternity is. Sure. This is temporal, and it lights my fire too, right? I grew up in New Hampshire, live free or die. You know, I'm a student of the Constitution and history, and freedom and liberty is what the country is founded on. But in the end, or the idea of it, that eventually we could get there. But again, it doesn't mean that it was meant to be forever. Christ is forever. And it took me a long time to let go of that, getting angry over that stuff, and accept the fact this is just how human nature is going to turn. And that the only thing that's true and never changes is that Jesus Christ died for me on the cross, that my sins are forgiven by my bowing to him and worshiping him and doing his will.
Talking about Bob Woodward and the whole Watergate thing, I look at that now with new eyes. Had Richard M. Nixon been a Democrat, Watergate would have never happened. I'm convinced of it. It wasn't. I don't think they were seeking truth. They were seeking to take out a Republican. You want to know why I said, what year was that? Watergate, 72, right? 72. There was a little scandal that happened in 60. When the presidency came down to one state, Illinois, and Springfield called up to Chicago in the famous phone call to Mayor Daley and asked Mayor Daley, you're the last ones out. How many votes do you have? And Richard M. Daley's famous response, how many votes you need? Now, that was famous. Everyone knew about it. Where was the Bob Woodwards there? They didn't ask any questions. Nothing to see here. I'm convinced, because I often said that too about Watergate, when the media had integrity. They ain't had no daggone integrity, not even back in 72. It was about politics. It was about politics even back then, which then saddens me to think that it's been this way for much longer than we realized. And so President Donald Trump is fighting. Should he still fight? Is there something to fight for? Here we have, for those of you who have not seen it, I think it was released today that Giuliani actually is talking about a person who has evidence. Abby, I think you told me that this person was supposed to be on television last night, but was canceled by Fox News. Did not let them on, but here's Giuliani on with Steve Bannon. Here we go.
Institutions. This lawsuit is a combination of what Thor was working on in Coleman. Is that correct in Michigan?
Correct, and they both have superior information. Thor has the part of it with the government insiders who basically are turning, let's call it state's evidence. They are Democrats who are testifying against a Democratic effort because they were so disgusted. That's basically Thor's people. Coleman has the community people, and he's got the Dominion people. And they were the ones who were the actual, not the poll watchers, the observers, who were excluded, who were lied to, but two of whom stayed behind after all the Republicans had been left out. And they're the ones who got the evidence on the 100,000 votes coming in. And they have some photographs also. You put those two together, and you've got some very, very powerful evidence that room at the Cobb Center, I think it was a complete, let's make up the votes room. How much do we have to make up, and let's get there?
Jack writes in the chat, facts. Dead people vote. That's fact 1. Fact 2, dead people vote more often by mail. Fact 3, dead people always vote Democratic. I think that is true. So let me open it up to the table. Should the president keep fighting? Or should he, for the good of the country, just concede? Eric? You gotta let me know. Eric, you gotta let me know. Okay. Okay.
You're good, go.
Okay. There are parameters that have already been set up by the Constitution in terms of, I keep looking at him. There are parameters that are already set up as to when certain things have to be done in this election process after the election. Unfortunately, we are living in an instantaneous society when we want everything now. That's not how the process goes. The president is well within his time constraints to do what he's trying to do now. So in light of the fact we've got these discrepancies going on the other side, at least suspected discrepancies, he is within his rights to submit all of the evidence. He's got time to do that, and he should continue to do that.
For the good of the country, the president must fight. He has to. If he lets this go and all this, okay, it appears to be a lot of election fraud. I mean, there is so much that is coming out. But even if it weren't enough to change the actual outcome of the election, he must root this out. We cannot afford to let this cancer metastasize for another 4 years and leave these people in place. And not just in this election, but in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, and in Washington, D.C., the swamp must be drained or we don't have a free country, period.
Abby, that's all good and well, but let me suggest the rot didn't start 8 days ago. The rot started when we saw Planned Parenthood selling baby body parts. We said nothing. The rot was exposed further when we said people with male genitalia were women. That undercut all, how can I say it, morality and truth and the attachment to reality we had as a culture. What you are saying takes moral courage and clarity, and I'm afraid we don't have it. Can God give us a dispensation? Yes. That's what I'm hoping and that's what I'm praying for. But this, I'm not sure we have the moral clarity and the moral fortitude to stop it at this point.
And again, this isn't just your point, James. This is not rot that has all of a sudden materialized out of nowhere. Right. This has been decades in the making. The revolution of the '60s, the sexual revolution, the trying to shed off the mores of what was right, Christianity, mocking Christians. But also keep in mind the hypocrisy as well. We encourage our president to fight. If there's fraud, his job is to enforce the law as the executive branch. If there's fraud, yes, fight for it. If they thought there was fraud way back in 2000 with Gore and Bush and Gore, I didn't have a problem fighting it if the Democrats thought there was an issue. If there's a problem, it doesn't matter which side, fight for it. I find the hypocrisy to reach new heights in, Bush is trying to steal, or Trump is trying to steal the election. Well, then you could say the same thing about Gore back then. Well, no, that was, no, you can't. Not incidences, though. Right. You can't have it both ways. Right, so Gore was trying to steal it. If Bush is trying to steal it, or Trump is trying to steal it, if Trump is trying to find out if there was nefarious activities, I could say that Gore was trying to do the same thing back then. But you can't have the opposite, because then whatever arguments you come up with don't make any sense. But to your point, this rot has been going on for a long time, and now it's blatantly out in the open, and that's. I fear for the future of my country. Yeah. Again, as a Christian, I don't lose sleep. I know in the end what happens. I've read the end of the book. I've talked long enough. I have peace. I know what we need to focus on, that Christ is the answer. But it doesn't mean that a nation will survive forever just because of that. Nations rise and nations fall. He is forever.
But yet, I still think we should fight. He has no choice.
I agree. We fight.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I know you do. But again, my 17-year-old son is looking at this saying, why should I vote? When they can do this in broad daylight, why should I vote? And you don't want to discourage. Yeah.
The youth of America being discouraged.
Yeah, and so he has to fight. And I don't care how much whining and complaining and tears. Oh boy, what I would love if Arizona flips, if Michigan and Wisconsin flips, and Pennsylvania flips, if they found fraud in all of them, including Georgia, and flips. Let me ask you guys this, and as we close up, let's deal with a harsh topic. There are people who are self-professing Christians who are rooting for Joe Biden with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, who says, praise the Lord, Joe Biden won. What are your thoughts to those who are self-professing Christians who can say such thing? Go ahead, Abby.
Actually, I'm going to quote David Limbaugh, so this is not my thought. But I heard him say many years ago, if you are a Christian voting Democrat, and I'm talking about like in a national election, because there are maybe some in local races. You tell me all the time that there are better Democrats in local races. But in something like this, either you do not understand the Democrat Party or you don't understand Christianity. And I'll stand on that.
So what do you say to that? That's what you would say to them?
Yeah, well, we'd have to get a little bit into the weeds and start talking about policy, which is what everyone should be voting on ultimately. But let me also say this. With regard to abortion, you don't have to get into the weeds at all. All the facts are known about that issue. And now we have abortion throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. We have second-term abortions where they're literally ripping the arms and legs off of living babies in the womb. That ought to tell you everything you want or need to know about who to vote for and who ought to be nowhere near leadership, because that is today's Democrat Party.
But hold on. Abby, I want you to respond to this. Let's assume this is true. That Tim Keller and Mark Deaver are registered Democrats. What do you say about that?
I'm going to stand by what I just said. Either they don't understand the Democrat Party, and I'm certain that they do, or they don't understand Christianity.
It is tough. This election is ripping family apart, literally. And I'm going to have a phone conversation tomorrow. It's going to be fun, but I will not compromise.
You know, I had said to someone a long time ago, and even during this election, anytime that I am talking to someone who is running for a position, my first question to them is, are you pro-life or pro-choice? Because how they feel about that tells me a lot about how they see the world and how they will rule and how they will decide, and
whether or not their conscience is seared.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Whether they believe in absolute truth. It's just it can't, years ago when Roe v. Wade was first a thing, we didn't have ultrasounds, we didn't have all these things. There is no excuse nowadays. No excuse for all the facts not to be known. And with all the people, it's just unbelievable. There was a Republican in our area that was running for a state position, and he was trying to get votes, and I asked him, are you pro-life? And he said, no, I believe in the woman's right to choose. And I said, well, what about the child's right? I said, I can't give you my vote, whether you're Republican or Democrat. But
let me read this. J316 Ministries. He says this. He says, this is a regular reminder. This is a regular reminder that America is a nation under God's judgment, and a nation that loves the Lord. You won't find 60 million murdered unborn children. And a nation that loves God, he puts up number 2, government policies that encourages the dismantling of the family structure, and policies that encourage out of wedlock pregnancies. And 3, counterfeit marriages and all forms of sexual immorality. With that said, so right before we wrap up, do you believe that America is under God's judgment? I believe J316, we have said this, and I've said this around months. They can tell you. I believe judgment has already started. I believe judgment has already started. I believe the separating the wheat from the tares, the goats from the sheep have started. And God has used the critical race theory to do that. And I'm starting to see people who are on the fence. Well, I'm not sure. And then you look at critical race theory, and they have to declare themselves. And they are adopting a gospel that is another gospel. That is not about the gospel that our Lord delivered to the apostles. And I think he's doing that in the church and outside the church. There are things that are going on that you just can't chalk up to just randomness, to coincidences. There's things going on worldwide. So I think America has to answer for the children. You know, Dale Tackett had a thing called the Truth Project many years ago. I did this maybe 15, 16 years ago. I went through the Truth Project for the first time. And he talked about the reality of murder. And he used the example with Cain and Abel. And he says, God comes to Cain and he shows the perspective of murder from God's point. And he says to Cain, Cain, your brother's blood is crying out from the earth to me. Your brother's blood, it's crying out. And he says the ringing in God's ear from Abel's murder was horrific. He said if one man's murder is like that in God's ear, how does 30 million children sound in his ears? And when he said that, for the first time I started to contemplate sin from God's perspective. I can turn my eye away my head away when I see the horrific abortions I see on YouTube. I can't watch that anymore. God can't turn away. He can't turn away from rape, murder, the abuse of children, he can't turn away because he's all seeing. And because of that, you're going to pay. You're going to pay. Last thoughts as we wrap this up. The election, Trump, thievery. We now have, if this holds and the courts don't come up and start overturning in an overwhelming proof if it's given, we now have a vice president-elect who said on record she wants to legalize prostitution. We have a president-elect in Biden who says he wants to pass his first 100 days. He's going to try to pass the Equality Act, which will destroy many of gospel-centered ministries. Final thoughts. Where do you want me to start? Okay, let's go.
There are a lot of things that are going wrong in this country. My responsibility as a born-again Christian, among other things, is to stand up against it. The beautiful thing about being a born-again Christian is he is giving me new life and the promise of eternal life. This life we have on this planet is not eternal, but because I have blessed assurance, I'm not afraid to die.
Well, I don't know how all this is going to fall out, but I know that the one thing I've seen is for people that are true believers, it has really focused our hope on where it should be, and it has actually encouraged our prayer life in ways that I don't think I would have seen. And I've seen, even in pockets, revival and things happening that I wouldn't have seen years ago. So I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful that God is faithful even when we are not.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to kind of echo this along the same lines. If I didn't have Jesus, I wouldn't be sleeping at all. So I think I'll leave it there.
To have an eternal viewpoint of and know that the God of the universe, the creator of everything, loved me, each of us, so much that he gave his perfect son to die on the cross as a sacrifice to pay for my sins, the sins that break his laws, is incredibly humbling. It's peace that I've never known before. But most importantly, to me, it's the right perspective on all of this. This is nothing new. The corruption, the evil, the lust for power, this is nothing new. James, you are a student, and I love talking to you about a student of the Roman Empire. The lust for power is, you just read through history. The Caesars, the different Caesars they came through, and how quickly they degraded morally. Caligula comes to mind. Tiberius, another one. America is not immune to these things. The founders set up our country to try to chain that behavior through the Constitution so that there was very limited powers and let the freedom grow and see what happens with it. How does that change the human condition? And it didn't, and it won't. There's still lust for power, and America will fall like other empires have. I don't want it in my lifetime or my children or grandchildren's lifetime, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. What it means is we need to help others focus on what truly matters, our eternity. This is just temporal. And I read something on Facebook a few days ago that is persecution good for the church? And a lot of people professing to be Christians said, no, it's not. We shouldn't be persecuted, and that's bad for people. Well, it's bad for me individually because I might be put in chains, I might be beaten, whipped, I might be chased down the street and shot at. But didn't the church grow like nobody's business under persecution? And so what does it do? It sharpens us. These things sharpen us. This country and the things that are going on as Christians, it sharpens us to truly laser focus on what is really important. I would love for my country to continue to grow and be better, but if it doesn't, I teach my children what the truth is.
Just a few things on the chat room. People said this concept of evangelicals for Biden. Watch Georgia. There is a quote-unquote reverend, and that's in quotes, quote, Reverend Ralph Warnock, who's running for the Senate. Yeah. That was the guy in Georgia who says that he's a pastor, and said that the abortion is godly and he will keep it that way. And so, you want to jump in there? All right, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm about to tell you, he is the pastor of the church that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, he is. My understanding, he's the current pastor of that church. However, I also need to inform my peeps here that he was assistant pastor of a church that was in favor of, supported, and hosted Fidel Castro. So, just so you know.
Yeah. Once you get the abortion issue, everything else is fair game, right? Trust me, he's LGBTQ plus too. I don't need to know about him. He might be that too. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But why not? He can kill kids in the womb. Why not? But anyway, so they said, watch this guy Warnock. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Warnock. And then M3 Max says, Trump in or out, it's going to be tough, or it's going to be tougher. So either way, for true believers in this culture, it's not going to be easy, but that's okay. That's okay. It's in these times that spiritual heroes are revealed. It took a Goliath for David to slay him. It took lions for Daniel to go down, and it took a fiery furnace for Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego to distinguish themselves. And I think in the days to come, true believers will be able to distinguish themselves from the tares. And so I pray, I hope that the true church is up to the task. It is, because by definition it is the true church, and Christ will keep them. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you all for helping us grow. We've grown exponentially this week, and we will continue to bring you these views from a biblical perspective, not afraid, unafraid, speaking the truth in love. And that is what we do at Here for such a time as this. Thank you, and God bless.